Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, ma. Yes, ma. Clearly, ma.
Okay. Okay, fine. I had to move away from where there was background noise.
Okay. Wow.
All right. Thank you. So can somebody just recap what we did last week? Because I know we did a lot last week. Somebody should just volunteer and recap what we did last week. I wouldn't want to call name.
Yes, ma. Good evening, ma.
Evening.
Yes, ma.
Okay.
We discussed on data collection method.
Okay.
Then that's why we talk about qualitative and quantitative method of data collection.
Correct.
And you said quantitative has to do with the systematic techniques used to gather numeric information,
Okay.
that can be measured, that can be counted and analyzed. Then you talked about qualitative, where you mentioned that this method are used to gather non-numerical, descriptive, and in-depth information about probably people's experience, perception, about issue, belief, and social content.
Okay.
Then you also mentioned that we can use both, like mix the two together, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm not putting it together.
Okay.
And you said both can be used. That both can be used. And in some cases, I can't remember the cases now, but I know that you mentioned that both quantitative and qualitative can be used. Then you now talked about there are significant differences. You talk about the nature of the data that we are collecting, like in quantitative, the nature, the method, the nature of the data is numerical. That is for quantitative. And that is why you mentioned that that's when we will say 20% say yes, 10% say no, and so on and so forth. Then you now say qualitative method. The nature of the data is descriptive and non-numerical. You also mentioned that the significant difference can be seen also in the purpose. That is the purpose of the study. If it is just to measure and test hypothesis or compare or identify relationship between our between variables, then you said quantitative is the best method.
Okay.
We also talk about research approach, that if your research approach is the deductive type, where you test existing theories or hypotheses, then you said we can use quantitative. Then if our approach is inductive, then we can generating theories from data, then we can use qualitative.
Okay. That is a good one. So today we'll look at, we've mentioned the quantitative and we have mentioned qualitative. So what we'll do today, we'll try to explain the different types of qualitative and what they entail. When you say qualitative, what are the different methods you apply carrying out a qualitative research, methods in social work. So when we finish with qualitative, also we'll go in detail in quantitative. But that last week was to separate the two. And I remember that we had to come up with examples, where we can apply them and which should be prioritized over the other, which has to do with the objective of your study, the purpose of your study. What actually are you looking for? Just as we explained. So today, let's go into qualitative. So for qualitative research method in social work, we say that there are systematic approach. Qualitative research methods in social work are systematic approaches used to explore and understand. Remember this other word I used last Saturday, the lived experiences, the perceptions and the meanings individuals or communities attach to their social realities. That is, the qualitative research method in social work are so structured. They are structured techniques employed to investigate. I've not changed my word. I didn't use explore again. Can also investigate, explore, investigate, and comprehend. That is another word for understand. The lived experiences, perceptions, and significances that individuals and communities, could be individual, when you are studying individual, if you are studying a community, attribute to their social realities. So qualitative methods concentrate, while quantitative, remember, quantitative method will do what? Concentrate on numerical data and statistical analysis. Whereas qualitative research prioritizes in-depth. They prioritize depth, context, and interpretation. That is what they prioritize. Depth. They go in details. So in social work, which is based on human relationships, I hope you know that. Social work is based on human relationships, based on social justice and advocacy. Qualitative methods give us important information about complicated social problems, about at-risk groups, and how changes happen. Did you get that bit? Did you get that bit? I say in social work, which is based on human relationships. Am I correct?
Yes,
Social work is based on human relationships. Social work is based on social justice. Is that correct? If you don't answer, I will think you have lost me. So try and answer me so that I know that we are still together. You've not lost me.
Yes.
Okay. So in social work, what do we talk about? We talk about social relationships. We talk about social justice. And we also talk about what? Advocacy. So in that case, applying qualitative method will do what to us? It's important because it will give us important information about complicated social problems, about at-risk groups that we manage, and how change happens. So when we talk about qualitative research method, it has features, it has its characteristics. One of the major characteristics of qualitative research in social work is that it gives us that naturalistic inquiry. That is, studies are conducted in a real world settings. In a real world settings. What are the real world settings I mean here? Conducted in homes, communities, and organizations, rather than controlled environments. Another characteristic of it again is that it gives us what we call subjective understanding. Subjective, not objective, subjective understanding. That is, emphasis is placed on participants' perspectives and voices. Emphasis is placed on participants' perspectives and voices. And then it seeks to capture the complexity of social problems by considering context, considering culture, and also power relations. So the research design for qualitative is often emergent. That is, adapting as new insights emerge. Adapting as new insights do what? Emerge. So when you engage the participants, you may have probably one or two questions you have decided to ask them. But in course of discussion, more things will be revealing. You'll be asking further questions and probing in order to get in-depth understanding of what the problem is. So the research design is often emergent and adapting as new insights do what? Emerge. So we have different types, different qualitative research methods. We have the in-depth interview, we have the focus group discussion. So let's start with in-depth interview. I hope we are not hearing that concept for the first time. Are you hearing it for the first time? In-depth interviews.
No, ma.
Okay,
No.
fine. Okay. So when we say in-depth interview, in-depth interviews are qualitative research method that involve direct face-to-face or virtual interaction between you, the researcher, and the participant. And that is aimed at exploring personal experiences, perceptions, and meanings from that participant. Unlike the structured survey, which you have in a quantitative, in-depth interviews are flexible and are conversational. As if you and the participant are conversing. That's why I say it's flexible and conversational, allowing the participant to share rich, detailed narratives. If it is quantitative, you will not have that. You just give them the questionnaire, and then they just tick the questionnaire for you. There is no room for further question, further explanation. But for an in-depth interview, qualitative research method, the participant, there is that face-to-face, direct face-to-face contact or visual interaction between you, the social worker that is the researcher, and then the participants or the participant. It's always one in-depth, one-on-one, which is different from focus group where there will be more than one. And then at that point now, the in-depth interviews will be flexible and conversational. So you are conversing, allowing the participant to share, their rich, detailed narratives. So in social work research, in-depth interviews are particularly valuable because they capture the lived experiences of our vulnerable and marginalized populations, giving voice to those who might otherwise remain unheard. So that is about in-depth interview. Then it's what are the features of it? What characterized an in-depth interview that when you're doing it, you tell yourself, yes, I'm actually applying this method. One is that it is individualized, that is conducted one-on-one, focusing deeply on the participants. One-on-one, individualized, whereby it is conducted one-on-one, focusing deeply on the participants. Another feature of it is that questions allow exploration rather than yes or no responses. That is open-ended. Questions are what? Open-ended. It's not structured that in such a way that the participant will just say yes or no, give you yes or no response. No. Questions allow exploration. You investigate more rather than yes or no responses. Then it's also designed to uncover meanings. It's so designed to uncover what? Meanings, uncover motivations and perspectives. And that is why we say it is exploratory. It's exploratory because it's designed to uncover meanings, motivations, and perspectives. So you, the interviewer, can probe. You, the interviewer, you can probe, clarify, because where the participant does not understand what you're saying, you can go further. You can even see facial expression and all that. You know whether the participant is understanding you or not. This participant can even tell you, I don't really understand. Could you please, say it again because I'm not clear. Then you explain, you clarify. So it makes, interaction is flexible because you, the interviewer, you can probe, you can clarify or follow up based on the participants' responses. And that is what makes it flexible. It's flexible because you can probe, you can clarify where the participant is not clear, and then, or you can even follow up based on your participants' responses. One other good characteristics of in-depth interview is that it builds rapport and trust, encouraging disclosure of sensitive issues because it's interactive. It's interactive. You're discussing, you are conversing. It's interactive. And when it is interactive, it builds what? Rapport, trust. And that will encourage your participant to disclose, sensitive issues to you because it's just both of you. And it's not going to hide anything. It's him or her telling you the whole truth. So we have types of in-depth interviews. There are types. We have the structured in-depth interview. In this case, this follows a predetermined set of questions with little deviation. That is, before you engage your participant, you've already structured your set of questions that you're going to ask. You didn't just go without any questions in your mind. Most times you have a predetermined set of questions that you want to ask with little deviation. So, and that is useful for comparability across participants. And you want to compare, because you are not going to interview just one person over an issue. You may likely interview about 5 to 6 or 10 persons over an issue. So in that case, now you have a predetermined set of questions, because you are going to ask that same questions to the 5 of them or 6 of them that I have planned to interview. And you do that because you want to make, comparison kind of. So it's useful for comparability across the participants. So in that case, it means that the limitation of this is that it will restrict flexibility. Remember, we said that one of the characteristics of in-depth interview is that it's flexible. It's flexible in the sense that you, the interviewer, can probe. You can probe. But for this structured type of in-depth interview, the probing will not be so much. It will be limited. It will be limited. And that is why I say one of the limitation of this structured in-depth interview method is that it brings about restriction to some extent, because you have a already predetermined set of questions which gives room for just little deviation. So which means that you may not be able to probe so much. And the reason is because it's useful for comparability across the participants. Then you have the second type of in-depth interview, which we call semi-structured. Semi-structured. This one is most common in social work, semi-structured in-depth interview. Guided by an interview schedule. It's also guided by an interview schedule, but allows probing. It allows probing to a reasonable extent and follow-ups. And that provides a balance between, consistency and flexibility. So while the third one is the unstructured. Unstructured, as the word implies, unstructured. Unstructured in-depth interview, in this case is conversational with minimal pre-planned questions. You may have probably 5 or 6 questions, but as you engage your participants, the questions can even get to from 5 to 11, because you're probing. You are asking more questions to get to the depth of the issue. And so, for that reason, it allows the participant to freely guide the discussion. In an unstructured, in-depth interview, that allows participants to freely do what? Guide the discussion. And this is useful if the study is, exploratory in nature or ethnographic studies. So I've mentioned the 3 types. The 3 types of in-depth interview. One is the structured in-depth interview type, the semi-structured, and then the unstructured. Very easy to understand. So steps, now we come to the steps. We'll come to the steps, because We don't do it haphazardly. Remember that the definition of research says a systematic inquiry, and the in-depth interview is one of the methods. So we don't conduct in-depth interview haphazardly. We have steps in conducting in-depth interviews. The first step is planning and preparation. The planning and preparatory stage is the first step. In this case, it's assumed that you have defined the research objectives. You know your research objectives, because it's your research objectives that even enable you to know whether you have to use quantitative or qualitative. Now you have decided to use qualitative. So you define your research objectives. You have to identify the population and then select participants. The selection of your participants, of course, has to be purposive. It has to be. Remember when we talked about the different types of sampling technique, the two major types, and under the two major types, we had the ones under them. And under non-probability sampling technique, we have the purposive type. So for in-depth interview, you identify the population and you select participants purposively, because you won't go and take participants that are not involved in that issue you're studying. And then you can also use the snowball sampling. That is, you know what you're looking for. You're able to make the initial contact. From there, they refer you to other participants that are having the same issue that you're studying. The referral part of it, which is the snowball sampling. And then after you've done that, you develop an interview guide. Interview guide. You won't just go without anything, no question in mind. Oh, I just see my participant, I just start asking questions. No, you develop an interview guide. Interview guide with open-ended questions. Interview guide with open-ended questions. For example, can you describe your experience with so thing? When you say, can you describe your experience? It's an open-ended question. So you develop an interview guide with an open-ended questions. Then, when you've done that, you pilot test the guide for clarity and sensitivity. You'll be sure that actually your guide will address the issues you want. Then after this stage, you enter the building rapport. Building rapport. In this case, you begin with introductions and non-threatening questions. Begin with what? Introduction. You have to introduce yourself. Make yourself well known to the participants and non-threatening questions. Then you establish trust. You have to let the person know that, look, this is purely research. There's high level of confidentiality. Just believe me that all I will say here, no third ear will hear it. I'm so person. I am researching on this. This is who I am and all that. So when you have done proper introduction, it enables you to establish trust. especially with vulnerable groups, which we handle. Like for instance, if you have to look at cases of domestic violence, the woman may not want another ear to hear it, especially the husband. Give her rest, full assurance that, look, nobody will hear it. I'm just working on this. So assure participants of what? Confidentiality. Assure participants of what? Confidentiality. And let them know that it's a voluntary participation. Let the person know that it is a voluntary participation. I am not forcing you to be part of this study. I want it to come from your mind that you're ready to share your experience with me. You are free to say you are not going to be part of it and all that. But I'm assuring you that I must maintain a high level of confidentiality. It's all private between you and I and all that. By the time you talk softly to the participant, the person will give in. So that is what I mean by building rapport. You build rapport by, first of all, you begin with introduction and ensure that you don't ask, threatening questions. You try as much as possible to establish trust, and then assure your participant, of your high level of confidentiality, and they are free to participate and not to participate. So after you've done that, you now come to conducting the interview proper. And how do you start? You start with broad questions. Move gradually to specific or sensitive questions. You start with broad questions. Move gradually to sensitive, or specific issues. Then you use probing techniques. Probing techniques like such as can you tell me more? Can you tell me more? What do you mean by that? These are probing techniques. When you tell some, okay, you just say, I'm so bad. Can you tell me more of yourself? Oh, it's a probing technique. Then practice active listening. What do I mean by active listening? You are nodding, and then you're summarizing. Okay, you said it's like this. Yes, okay. You're nodding, showing that you're actually listening actively, and you ensure you don't answer calls. You don't react to every movement around the place. Of course, the environment will be so calm that it's not where people are moving up and down that will distract you, because the participant is equally looking at you. So you practice what we call active listening, which will involve nodding. Yes, I'm with you. Okay. After some time, you do as if you're summarizing what the person has said, reflecting. When you are reflecting, it's okay. Yes, okay, yes. The person will just know that you are following up. But if you just wear a straight face and just be looking more like that, the person talking, your participant might think you are lost. But when you are following up, summarizing, nodding, summarizing, reflecting, it shows that you are actually listening attentively or actively. Then you record the interview. Remember, audio or video with consent, and you take field notes. The participant will see you writing. If you're to take notes, you must get the consent. For the audio and video, get the consent. Let the person know what you will do in course of the conversation. And then he or she will give approval. What you're saying, I'm going to, record it. If he gives consent, fine. If he does not, you don't force him or her. Then after conducting the interview, you now come to the closing of the interview. Closing of the interview is very important. In that case, what do? You summarize the key points. You summarize the key points to confirm understanding. That is the essence of summarizing the key points. Before the participant, you summarize the key points to confirm understanding. Allow your participants to add anything they feel is important. Because when you are summarizing to confirm understanding, most likely your participant will say, no, add this. Allow the participant to add anything he or she feels is important. And then after that, do not fail to say thank you. Do not fail to say what? Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for opening up. Actually see that you want these issues to be solved. So thank him or her and remind him of how findings will be used. Remind him again, because in the second stage, when you are trying to, introduce yourself and all that, and telling the participant about what you're doing, you must have told him how findings will be used, what you get from him or how will be used. So remind the person again. After thanking, remind, remember, I told you that these things I've got from you, this is what, I will use it for. Then you have ended with your participant. You now come to post-interview process. This one now, you transcribe recordings verbatim. If you recorded, you don't keep it. As you just leave the participant, you go and transcribe so that you don't lose out the information. Anything can happen to the recorder you used or your phone or whatever that you used. So do not procrastinate in transcribing. Quickly transcribe recordings verbatim. Then you code and analyze the data using qualitative analysis method, which we call the thematic or the grounded theory. Make sure that you maintain the confidentiality you promised by making that data anonymous. That is anonymizing the data. Remember, you promised that you are going to maintain high level of confidentiality. And one of the ways to do that is to make the data anonymous. Don't put it inside locker and lock it. Remember, if you use your phone, transcribe quickly, and if it's a flash, you send it to a flash and keep it well. Because when you have people around and they know that the research you're doing has to do with vulnerable groups, some very curious persons or amiable group of persons will always want to tamper with your recorders to get people's information. So you make sure you lock up the data you collected. Don't throw them around. Don't drop them on the table anyhow. So, what cases do we apply these in-depth interviews in social work? We can apply them in domestic violence studies, where you are trying to explore survivors' coping strategy and barriers to, accessing help. We can also apply in-depth interview in child welfare, where you want to have understanding of the foster children's experience in care systems. You can use that. What of in healthcare social work? Those of us that are in healthcare, they want to investigate patient family experiences with chronic illnesses. If you use questionnaire, that is quantitative research method, you cannot get all that you want. If you use focus group, you may not get all that you want, even though focus group discussion is one of the methods of qualitative, but that can't give you all that you want. So those of us that are in healthcare and you want to investigate patient family experiences with chronic illnesses, you apply the in-depth interview. The area of community development too, where it requires capturing residents' perspectives on poverty alleviation, poverty alleviation programs. You go on with in-depth interviews. Can also apply it on policy evaluation, that is assessing how social protection programs affect households in urban slums. We find out that in-depth interviews in social work is one of the methods that we use. So what are the strengths? The strength of it. That is the advantage of it. One is to provide rich, detailed data that ordinary surveys cannot capture. When you conduct in-depth interviews, it will give you detailed data that are rich with the information you need. That is, it will capture details. You are interacting with the participants, so you will see the participants' emotions. You will see the participants' emotions. You will see the meanings the participant is giving to whatever is telling you. And so it allows participants to express, they express in their own words. If you survey, it's what you have put down that they are ticking. But in in-depth interview, that allows your participant to express themselves in their own words. And you, the interviewer, can adapt by changing based on their responses. It gives you room to build trust, making it possible to explore sensitive issues. Sensitive issues such as abuse, stigma, discrimination. These are sensitive issues. Of course, it has its limitations. And what are the limitations? One major limitation is that it is time consuming in data collection and transcription. It's time consuming in data collection. That's getting this information from your participants. It could be time consuming And when you finish again, you go down again to begin to transcribe. Then another major limitation is that it limits generalization, because the sample size you are going to use is going to be small, not going to be large, going to be a small purposive sample that you collect. So you cannot really generalize your findings. And it requires high-skilled interviewers to manage sensitive issues, manage biases, and probing. So it's not something you say, oh, from questionnaire, you can get people to go about distributing the questionnaire. They fill it, they collect the questionnaire and bring to you and all that. But in this case, you are involved. Even if you have to use a research assistant, it has to be the one that is skilled, has to be a skilled interviewer. The person should be able to manage sensitive issues. And then risk of researchers' bias in framing questions or interpreting responses. That is another limitation. That is another limitation. If you are a researcher that you have once suffered domestic violence, and then you find yourself interviewing a participant that is a survivor of domestic violence, if you don't take time, you'll be biased in framing your questions. Am I correct? Hello?
Yes, ma.
Yes.
Can I be correct in that?
Yes, ma.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. That
Yes,
will be
ma'am.
bias.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
because you've once suffered it. And so there is tendency that you might bring in your own emotion into the whole process. So that I call the risk of researchers' bias in framing questions or interpreting responses. So participants may withhold or distort information due to social desirability bias. You know that, the participant is just telling you. He can distort the information, may not tell you the complete truth, because it's all left for him or her to tell you whatever he wants to say to you. Because you are looking at, you are seeing her or you are seeing him. And so the person may decide to withhold some things and will not withhold some information or distort information, So ensuring qualitative and rigorous in-depth interview, if you want to ensuring quality in your in-depth interviews, you combine with other methods. If you want to ensure quality, and rigor in your in-depth interview, we can combine it with other methods, such as a focus group discussion or observation or documents. If documents are available, you combine the documents with the your interview findings, and that will call triangulation. You're combining with other methods to ensure quality of your in-depth interview findings. And then you researcher to acknowledge and document their biases. You try to acknowledge their biases and document them. Another ways to ensure quality is that returning findings to participants for validation. The findings you've got, you do a member checking, all to achieve a validation of your findings. Then you ensure that you keep records of all methodological decisions and processes. Ensure that you do what? You keep records of all methodological decisions and processes. Provide detailed context to allow transferability, something that can be transferable. You keep your documents well. All the methodological decisions, the records must be there. This way you can ensure quality of your in-depth interview. So we must consider some form of ethical considerations. As I earlier said, there must be an informed consent. That is where you ensure that your participants understand the purpose of what you're studying, the risks and the benefits. And then confidentiality is there as one of the ethical considerations, where you use pseudonyms and secure data storage. You don't put the person's name. You use false names or false terms to secure your data storage. You won't put information from HIV patient. You can code it, give it another name, but you know what you have done, so that even if somebody picks it mistakenly from where you have stored it, the person will not even know where you got the information or the group of persons you got the information. And then for sensitive matters, you handle traumatic topics with care, so that you will avoid re-traumatizing the participants, because the participant has already been traumatized. And so when this information you get from him or her is not well secured, you end up re-traumatizing your participant that voluntarily participated in your research work. So sensitivity is very, very important, where you handle traumatic topics with care. And then you ensure the research has potential benefits for individuals or for communities, which we normally call beneficence. You ensure that that research has potential benefits. So you don't carry out research that will not benefit the group. Meanwhile, you have told them this is what they will benefit, this is what it's all about. And then at the end of the day, nothing happens. Next, if in case of like example of interview guide on child abuse, when you come to the introductory question, you can just start by saying can you tell me a little about yourself and your background? That is a broad question. Are you getting me as an introductory question? I'm looking at a child abuse, using child abuse as an example now for interview guide. And I say, can you tell me a little about yourself and your background? And then from there, you graduate to the core questions, which probably will be, can you describe your experiences with child protection services? You see, this now you're going core. You're bringing in core questions, which relates to what you're studying. And then you can go further and say, what challenges have you faced in seeking support for your child? You are going deeper. You can say, how have community attitude affected your situation? So you're going in. So what do you think social workers can do better to support families like yours? Are you getting me? I'm looking at a situation where you are carrying out a study on child abuse. The questions, you remember I talked about structured questionnaire, semi-structured, structured interview guide, semi-structured interview guide, and unstructured. You've prepared your questions. Maybe the first set of questions will be the introductory question, which will be, can you tell me a little about yourself and your background? And then after that, you go to core questions, which has to do with, can you describe your experiences with child protection services? What challenges have you faced in seeking support for your child? How have community attitudes affected your situation? And what do you think? Because you must end with that. What do you think social workers can do better, to support families such as yours, that are going through this problem? And then when you finish, we always like to ask, is there anything we have not discussed that you feel is important? Always make sure you end with that question. And we normally refer to such questions as closing questions. You have asked all the questions you had, the patient, the participant would have also asked and all that. And then when you are finished, there's always the need to ask, is there anything we have not discussed that you feel is important we should also talk about and add to what we have discussed? And it will shock you that your patient your participant can just raise one issue and say, this one is also important too. Or we say, no, I think we have covered everything. Just as I want to ask you now, is there anything we have discussed now in this our in-depth interview that you think we should add again? Because it's not the first time you're hearing it, in-depth interview. So I have finished talking about in-depth interview. So I'm asking you this closing question. Is there anything we have not discussed in this interview, in-depth interview, that you feel is important we should also talk about? The class is not answering me.
Yes, ma. I would like to ask, in the case of forensic investigation, as a researcher or social worker, is it can we disclose our confidentiality to other agency like EFCC, police, and some other agency or NGO who are also in on this particular case? What do you expect a social worker to do now?
Okay. I want us to answer. Maybe you might need to repeat your question again so that
Yes, I said that in
no,
the
you are asking the class now. I want everybody to make contribution.
okay, class, I'm asking that in a case where we find ourselves conducting in-depth interview as a researcher, and we were taught about confidentiality, can we review our confidentiality to the other agency like EFCC, police, or NGOs in order to foster the investigation or to continue the investigation? Is it mandatory for us, or do we have any guide or any restriction to this phenomenon? Thank you.
I want to hear you talk, because you've been practicing social work all this while.
Yes, sir. You mentioned mandate. I don't know what you meant by is it mandate for. Uh, I
I never mentioned mandate. I said that if we have
the
particular research we are doing and it
you said
involves
is it
some other
mandatory?
agency.
Sir, I heard you. Relax. Let me
Okay,
ask my
okay.
what. Let me tell you what you said. Is it mandatory for you to declare, your confidentiality to the people that you want to work with? So I said I don't understand that. That's number one that I want you to clarify. But if I am working on a case and I needed another agency, I think I should be able to tell them some of the things that will help us to achieve whatever we need to achieve, since we are working, to achieve the same goal. But when you now say is it mandatory, that's where I could not really pin down that is it mandatory for yours to declare your confidentiality to them. That's what I don't understand. But I felt that if I am working with anyone or an agency and to achieve the same goal, there should be parts of that history that they need to know so that they too will be able to work and will be able to work together to achieve that same goal, since they are part of your process of achieving your purpose or whatever you intend to achieve. That's my submission. But that mandatory is what I don't really get. I want to learn from around that neighborhood. That's why
Okay. Another person should say something. I want everybody to say something about it. I want everybody to talk. It's like the other persons just muted their mic and went to do other things. I want everybody to make contribution before I will say my own.
Sorry, sir. Mr. Smith, sorry. Can you please come again, please? Or just give us some so that I can.
Hello, sir. Sir, please, can you recap that thing again? Hello? Battery for him at all.
We have men in this class that only 2 persons have spoken, and then the third person is asking the person that asked the question to say something, to repeat the question. Does it mean you are not listening to him?
I'm listening, ma'am.
So where is he now? To repeat what he said before. Hello? What is happening now?
I think Mr. Smith is not.
Network issue, sort of. It's like network through them in and out.
Oh yes, oh yes. So
if I'm to answer now, how will he hear us?
From the recording, ma.
Okay, let me answer his question now.
okay, ma. Thank you, ma.
I think he said in the case of forensic study, that
Okay.
is where you have to bring in the other people, like forensic study, which has to do with the police, the court, and all that. He said, can we disclose, the data we collected from in-depth interviews from participants? Is that not what he asked?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
No, my dear sister that answered, is that not what he asked?
He's back, ma. Yes, ma.
Yes,
Related
I'm
to
back. It was cut off.
I
I don't know.
network.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
the third person was asking, he said you should repeat your question again so that he will give his own response to your question.
Okay. Okay. It's not a big question. I'm just asking in the
Yes.
area of confidentiality that if you are going through a case or research and some other agency are requesting such confidentiality case from you as a researcher, and now start examples like police, EFCC, and some other agency.
Yes.
Are we can we release the information or the data to them for further investigation, maybe for forensic investigation or what have you? That is the question.
Did you
And
hear
I
him?
say
So
this
now
phenomenon.
say your own.
I say this phenomenon, yes.
You've had him now, so you talk now.
Well, maybe I should add my contribution because of time. I think if it is life-threatening case and it is a trusted agency like the federal government, EFCC, and all that, I think I can, when it is a forensic case, we will remove the area, the barrier of confidentiality for the proper investigation or the proper research venting. That is my own take in this regard, sir. Ma.
Okay.
A chance to be corrected anyway. We are learning.
Okay. He asked a good question. That your
Thank
question
you, ma.
is good.
Thank you, ma.
Okay. So we know that in ethical, the answer depends, your answer depends on the ethical framework, the legal context, and the purpose of the forensic study. That is the study you are carrying out. Eh? You know whether this study is the one that police will use, or is it for academic purpose? Is it the one for EFCC to use? Are you getting me? The research you are carrying out, this study you are carrying out, you in the first place should know what it is for. Is it something that you'll be called upon by EFCC to release the information, or
Yes,
the court?
you cited the case of domestic violence, and I
That-
reflected back the domestic violence you could be called upon at any time to come and represent the client or the participant of this research. That's what I brought that. And when you are
Okay.
mentioning
So
about the yes, ma'am. Thank you.
okay, listen. Data collected through in-depth interview should not be disclosed in any way that identifies participants unless explicit informed consent was obtained. So in that case, participants are usually told whether their information may be shared. Are you getting me?
Yes, ma'am.
The participants are usually told whether their information may be shared. For example, in court or with the law enforcement agency like the EFCC you have mentioned, or in academic publication. And that is why I'm saying that these are the things you have to let the participant to know. So before you even carry out the research, you should know whether this information you're getting, will you be called upon by EFCC or by court to come and defend or to release your findings? Or is it that your study is for academic publication? So if it is for court or for law enforcement agency, participants are usually told. You tell them what you want to use the information for. And so when you're building their confidence and trust, when you let them know, if you say it's for court case or for EFCC, when you finish explaining, if the person wants you to go to that extent, he or she will continue with the interview. But if not, remember that you're going to let the participant know that participation is voluntary. So some of them do pull out, some will not pull out. So, but what I'm trying to say in essence is that participants are usually told whether their information may be shared, either in court or with the law enforcement, or are you doing it for academic publication. So breaking this agreement can undermine trust and violate research ethics. You must come to agreement with them. So in a forensic context, the data may sometimes, be needed by a court or required by the law. For instance, in criminal investigations or cases involving threats or safety. So in those situations, the researcher may be legally compelled to disclose the information. Because I know you asked that. The researcher may be legally compelled to disclose the information if it's in
Thank you,
criminal
ma'am.
investigation ahead. So, different countries have different laws. Different countries have different laws about privilege and confidentiality protections for researchers. Different countries have different laws about privileges and confidentiality protections for researchers. Like for example, in US, a certificate of confidentiality may protect research data from forced disclosure. Well, in Nigeria, disclosure is more directly governed by criminal procedure and evidence law in Nigeria. So, but in the practical guidelines, we always say do not disclose identifiable raw data from interviews. Do not disclose identifiable raw data. That is data that will have names, voice, direct transcript. You don't do that unless participants have given, unless a participant has given explicit information. Explicit informed consent or a court order requires it. So instead, you researchers usually, present what we normally present aggregated findings, coded data, and anonymized quotations in forensic reports. That is what we do in forensic reports. In forensic reports, we present aggregated findings, coded data, or we anonymize the quotations in the forensic reports. That is what we do. So if disclosure is necessary, participants should be informed of this possibility during consent process. Are you getting me? If you have coded the data, aggregated the data and everything, if disclosure is necessary, you must inform your participants. Participants should be informed of this possibility during consent process. If you, the researcher, know that time may come when they will ask, compel you to disclose this information. That is, if disclosure is necessary, participants should be informed of this possibility. Inform them that there is the possibility that this information you're going to release to me will become necessary to, become useful by the court or the law enforcement agent and all that. You have to tell them that during the consent process. And so, like for example, say, your information may be used in legal proceedings if required by law. I hope I'm answering your question.
You are, ma.
So you need to let the participant know that the information may be used in legal proceedings if required by law. Remember that you give them the option of pulling out, not participating in the interview or not. In fact, it's not only interview. Anything you need to collect from your client, even in focus group, whatever, you must, if it's something that it becomes necessary that it will be disclosed, let them know and tell them that your information may be used in legal proceedings if required by law. So, but in summary, what I'm telling you in summary is that you don't disclose. I say no to it. You cannot freely disclose raw interview data from patients in a forensic study. Did you get me?
Yes, ma'am.
Because of ethical and confidentiality obligations. Then when I say yes, yes means that disclosure may happen only under specific conditions with informed consent. And then with that informed consent, when you have anonymized your data. So disclosure of interview data will only occur under certain conditions with informed consent. I've said it, I'm repeating it again. No, with informed consent. If participants provide explicit written consent for their information to be disclosed or published in identifiable form, you give them this written consent, they have to sign. Then if a court of law or tribunal or other legal empowered authority issues a tribunal or order requiring disclosure of specific data, that is where you have a legal requirement. So, but please, the most important thing is that all participants will be informed though, during the consent process about the limits of confidentiality. Eh? All
Yes, ma'am.
participants must be informed during the consent process about the limits of confidentiality, including the specific circumstances under which disclosure may be legally or ethically required. So by participating, now individuals acknowledge their understanding of this condition. Make sure they have understanding of these conditions before ever you start the interview. Don't be in a hurry to start an interview, especially when it has to do with sensitive issues, which you know as social workers will handle almost on daily basis. Okay, so we take the second one and end for it. What is it by the time now? It's okay, 6:45. So let's quickly look at a focus group discussion, which is another important qualitative research method in social work. Focus group discussion. Focus group discussions, which we normally call the FGDs. FGD. Yeah, they are widely used in qualitative research method in our social work practice. And we use it to explore group norms. We use it to explore collective views. When you want collective views, or when you want to explore shared experiences. This time around, you're not looking for the view of one person, but collective view. Collective views, shared experiences. You're exploring the group norms. You want to get collective views of the participants. You want to collect their shared experiences. Unlike in the in-depth interviews, which are one-on-one, focus group discussions involve a small group of participants, usually 6 to 12, who engage in a guided conversations on a specific topic, on a specific issue. And that has to be facilitated by a moderator. That is by you, the moderator. The group is usually 6 to 12. You don't make it too large. Usually 6 to 12. It's a small group of participants. And so you engage them in a guided conversation. It's not a conversation where everybody will just be talking whatever. Guided conversation on a specific, note that, guided conversation on a specific issue, on a specific topic. And you have to be the facilitator, facilitated by a moderator. We use it very well in our social work because it provides insight into how individuals construct meanings in a social context, revealing not only what people think, but also how and why they think that way. You see? So it makes them, especially valuable in social work. This makes them valuable in social work, where group processes, community perceptions, and social dynamics strongly influence interventions and policies. So what are the characteristics of focus group, the features of focus group discussions? One is always group oriented. That is, participants discuss and interact with each other, not just the moderator. That is one characteristic. What is it? That is one feature of focus group discussions. It avails the participants the opportunity to discuss and interact with each other, not just with the moderator. And then the group setting stimulates discussion. The group setting will do what? Stimulate discussions and new ideas, and which makes it interactive. Because it's an interactive session, it will stimulate discussions and new ideas. Then discussions will revolve around a central theme, or revolve around a program or issue, meaning that discussion is focused. It captures when you are having focus group discussions, it captures attitudes, capture perceptions, and social norms. And that can be adapted by communities. We can use it for community study, organization, or special population. In social work, we use focus group discussions to explore community perceptions. We use it to explore community beliefs and attitude about social issues. So, social issues, that is why I say you can do triangulation, you do in-depth interview, you go ahead again to conduct a focus group discussions. So, to explore community beliefs or attitude about a social issue, we use focus group discussion. Then to identify collective needs, social workers, when we want to identify collective needs and priorities for program design, we use focus group discussions method. Then when our objective is to understand social norms influencing behavior such as stigma around HIV, gender roles, you can't just go on to do in-depth interview alone. You need focus group discussion because the objective is to understand social norms that influence behavior. When you want to evaluate social programs by assessing group level feedback, you have come up with a program, and then the program has been on, and then at the end of the day, you want to evaluate that program. It will not be proper for you to use in-depth interview. You prioritize focus group discussion over in-depth interview because you want to evaluate that social program by assessing group level feedback. You want to get the feedback of that program. One person cannot give you what you need. Then when you want to complement other qualitative or quantitative methods for triangulation, that is where I've mentioned that earlier. You've done in-depth interview, you want to triangulate it, you want to get ensuring quality in your in-depth interview. You bring in focus group discussions to complement that, to complement that method. So as I earlier said, the composition of a focus group, the size should be 6 to 12 participants is ideal. 6 to 12 participants is ideal. If you take too small a group, like let's say 3, and no, it will not be enough. If you take too large again, it will prevent equal participation. So 6 to 12 is ideal because too small a group may limit group views. And then when you take too large a group, it may prevent equal participation because some persons will just kukuma keep quiet. When the noise becomes too much, they will just keep quiet and be looking at others that are talking. When the group is too large, it will not give room for equal participation because some may decide to keep quiet and not talk and be watching as if they have come to observe. So the group too, group may be homogeneous, that is only women survivors of domestic violence. Depending on your research question, if your research question wants to have just a homogeneous group, you have only them. If it's the one you want a heterogeneous group, then it means that there will be mixed community members. Remember what I'm saying? If you want to assess how a program has helped, and the program that is supposed to benefit every member of the community, you want to evaluate the effectiveness of that program. In that case, the group should be a mixed community members. Then the selection of your composition of the group should be purposive. Participants should share some common experience that are relevant to the topic. So these are the things you have to consider when you are composing the group, when you are trying to form the group. You are free to have multiple focus group discussions. So you can have up to 4 to 8 groups or more. Do you understand me? Take for instance, you're conducting program evaluation, and you come into, let me use my community in River State. I'm from Obakre. Hello, are you hearing me? I'm from Obakre community. And Obakre community is made up of Obakre town, or what will I call it now? It's made up of 5 communities. 5 communities make up Obakre. And we carry that program. We want to evaluate the program, how the program, the effectiveness of the program. You are free to, since I said it's made up of 5 communities, you are free to have focus group discussion in this community, this community, this community. So you don't need to just have one focus group discussion. You can have multiple focus group discussions. But if it's done in just one particular group, small community, you can have one. If it's so large, you can have 4 to 8 focus groups. That is what we call multiple focus group discussions. So you, now that I said you'll be the facilitator of that group, of that focus group discussion. What are your roles? So the role of the moderator. And I'm saying that you, the moderator, you are central to the success of focus group discussions. Bear that in mind. Because your role will be to guide the discussion using an interview guide. Hello, are you with me?
Yes, ma.
You must use an
Yes, ma'am.
interview guide. When you are conducting focus group discussion, you must use an interview guide. And your role is to use an interview guide. And then you encourage participation from all members. Please, participation from all members. That is why the number is small, 6 to 12. So pay attention and ensure that every member of that group talk. Every member talks. You don't just leave some to be looking, because there are some that will just be looking at others. When this one open mouth to talk, they look. No. And that is why we normally give them names. On their own, they take names. They just take physicians' names like that. And then you now ask, some take color and all that, numbers and all that, depending on how you want to give them, and then you ensure that you call them up to talk. So encourage participation from all members. Ensure that the discussion remains focused, yet flexible. Because if you are not careful, the discussion can be derailed by them talking so many things. So ensure that the discussion remains focused. Then manage groups dynamic, preventing domination or conflict. Please prevent domination by one person talking more than the other. Or maybe because of talking, conflict will come up. So please manage group dynamics, because in group, you will always see some persons trying to dominate and conflict can come up. So you manage group dynamics by making sure you prevent domination and what? Conflict. It's required that you, the moderator, use probing and follow-up questions. You are the one that will be asking probing questions and probing and follow-up questions. Then you ensure, very importantly, that you create a safe and respectful environment for participants. Safe and respectful what? Environment for participants, please. Safe and respectful environment for participants. So what is the process? Focus group discussion is not done haphazardly. It has a process. And we start with the process of planning and preparation. And when we talk about planning and preparation, you define clear objectives. You develop your discussion guide. You develop your discussion guide with open-ended questions. Then you go on to recruit participants that are relevant to your study. And then make sure you select a neutral, comfortable, and accessible location. And then you arrange for note takers and audio or video recording. Of course, there must be consent too. There must be what? Consent before you do that audio or video recording from all the participants. Then when it now comes to conducting the discussion, they are all seated comfortably in a neutral location. Then you welcome participants and explain the purpose, the confidentiality as usual, and then the ground rules. You know what I mean by ground rules? Then you begin with icebreakers or general questions. You progress from broad questions to specific questions as usual, just as you did in an in-depth interview. And then you encourage participants to interact with each other, not just the moderator. You shouldn't be the only person talking. You just throw the question, you leave it, and then you see them answer. Initially, they will find it difficult to start. It's like, who will start now? You're free to just call up one person saying, what do you think about? Okay, say something. Gradually, just see everybody getting interested and they will all be, start participating. So you begin with an icebreaker. Tell a story like that, something that can stimulate them and all that, or a general question. Then you record responses and observe non-verbal cues. And you ensure that yes, focus group discussion does not take too long. It's not something that should last for 4 or 5 hours. Ensure time management. So for that reason, you have to ensure time management. Don't allow them to just talk, 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 talk. At least it should not last for more than 2 hours. 1.5 to 2 hours per session is common. You can't keep somebody for more than 2 hours. 1.5 hours is okay. 2 hours, you should be able to get all that you need from them. And of course, we always have the closing session. Closing session, what do you do there? You summarize the key points raised, then allow final comments from participants, and then don't fail to thank them. Don't fail to do what? Thank them. When you finish thanking them, you explain the next step will now be you debrief with note takers, transcribe recordings, and then the last one is to conduct thematic or content analysis of data. So I've earlier told you where we apply it. The objectives of your study will determine what you will do. If it is community development, where you have to assess community needs such as water, sanitation, or housing, you use focus group. If it is in a healthcare sector where you want to explore beliefs about mental health, HIV prevention, you use focus group. If it is for child welfare, where you want to, understanding parental attitudes towards child protection policies, is focus group that will be better. If it's a case where you want to examine cultural perspectives of gender-based violence, that is those of us that want to that are into gender and social justice, you use focus group. If it is for policy evaluation where that requires gathering community feedback on social protection or poverty alleviation program, you use focus group. What are the advantages?
My time is over.
Yes, I'm concluding already. The advantage there is that one of the major advantage of focus group discussion is that it captures collective views and group norms allow participants to build on each other's responses. And then the limitation. Data may be influenced by groupthink, that is a conformity pressure. That's when people are saying maybe somebody may have another idea, but when the person discovers that 2-3 persons or more people are having one particular idea, the person can just decide to join them, and that will call data may be influenced by groupthink.
Conformity pressure.
Yes, I call it conformity pressure. So, and one of the limitation again is that it requires skilled moderation and careful handling of group dynamics. So somebody who cannot handle group dynamics may not be able to do focus group discussion well. By the time you finish, you will not get anything because there may be quarrel, misunderstanding, and all that. And the principal thing that made you to gather 6 to 12 persons will be lost. So if you want to ensure that your focus group discussion is of quality, you do translation by adding a survey observation. You ensure that you keep detailed field notes and audio trials, and then make sure that you use independent coders to reduce research biases. You validate findings by conducting multiple focus group discussions across different groups. Of course, our ethical consideration remains the same thing. Informed consent will be there. Voluntary participation. Avoid coercion. Avoid what? Coercion. Don't force anybody to belong to the group. Stress that participants must respect each other's privacy. Confidentiality. You stress confidentiality to them because this time around it's not you and the interviewee. It's you and 6 to 12 persons. So stress, I use the word stress. Stress that participants must respect each other's what? Privacy. Did you get me?
Yes, ma.
So this one is the confidentiality is not just you keeping it, but that the other participants must respect each other's what? Privacy. And then ensure that the group discussion does not cause harm. Ensure that the group discussion does not do what? Cause harm or stigma. Ensure that it does not cause harm or stigma. So in conclusion, focus group discussions, I would say they are powerful tools we use in social work research. When we want to have understanding of collective experiences, we use focus group discussion. When we want to have understanding of group level dynamics, we use social group, focus group discussion. If we want to have understanding of social norms, we use focus group discussion. So they are especially useful in community-based interventions. They are what? Useful in community-based interventions. They are useful in participatory action research and program evaluation. Is that clear?
Yes, ma.
Okay. So if I may ask again, is there anything that we need to discuss that is important under focus group discussion, which I missed out? And if none, we can end the class. Any question?
Thank you, ma.
Any question? Okay. Did the lecture go down well?
Yes, ma.
Very well, Lee. Very
For
well. Very well.
explanation.
So
Always on point.
okay, so please, I want when you will carry out your research work, you will be beating about the bush. Where you are supposed to use qualitative, you jump into quantitative. At the end, you don't get any useful data. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma. Have a
Thank
lovely
you, ma.
weekend.
Thank you. All right.
Good night, ma.
All right.
Appreciate you, ma.